So you're ready to dive into screenwriting, huh? Got your Google Doc fired up, ready to pour all those amazing stories into the world.
Always exciting to see that initial enthusiasm.
But then you hear those whispers
Right.
about proper formatting being the real key.
Ah, yes. The age-old debate. Can Google Docs really cut it?
That's what we're going to unpack today, see how it measures up to those dedicated screenwriting programs.
Should be interesting. There's a lot more to screenplay formatting than people realize. It's not just aesthetics.
Right, it's practically its own language.
Exactly. And like any language, fluency matters, especially in a field as competitive as screenwriting.
For sure. Okay, so one of the sources we're looking at today dives right into margins. Apparently the standard 1 inch all around doesn't fly in screenplay land.
Yeah, margins might seem like a small thing, but they're surprisingly important. That wider left margin, 1.5 inches to be exact, it's not arbitrary.
So there's a method to the seeming madness.
Absolutely. Think about it. If your script gets printed, passed around, that extra space becomes essential for binding, notes, all that jazz.
Makes sense. Never thought of it like that. It's like unspoken visual cues that actually matter.
They make a huge difference, subconsciously guiding the reader's eye, creating a better reading experience overall.
Speaking of visual cues, another source is all about font choice. And apparently, Courier reigns supreme. What's so special about Courier?
Courier's dominance in screenwriting. It's deeply rooted in the history of the industry. Think back to the days of typewriters, Courier being a monospaced font, every letter the same width, it was the standard.
Right. So it's like a holdover from the old days.
Exactly, but it's more than just nostalgia. See, that visual consistency, it makes it easier to estimate page length, which is crucial when a single page should roughly equal 1 minute of screen time.
Interesting. So using a different font could throw off that whole timing thing.
Potentially, yeah. Plus, seeing something else might subconsciously signal to a reader that you're not as familiar with those ingrained industry standards.
It's amazing how much weight something as simple as a font can carry.
It's all about those subtle details.
Okay, we've got margins, fonts. What about page numbers? This source mentions they should be top right. Except, wait for it, not on the first page. What gives?
Yes. The curious case of the missing page number. Another one of those quirks with a historical reason behind it.
Hit me with it. I'm ready for more screenplay history.
Okay, so back in the day, typewriters, carbon copies, remember those? That first page, it often got smudged, sometimes even lost in the shuffle. Leaving it unnumbered meant that if the worst happened, you wouldn't lose crucial information about the script itself.
That's fascinating. I love how these little details have such interesting backstories.
It's true, the history of screenwriting is full of them.
So we've got our foundation margins, quirky page numbers, but now things are about to get really interesting.
We're getting into the really nitty-gritty of screenplay formatting.
The heart of it all.
Exactly, those all-important line types.
Yeah, this source I'm looking at, it mentions 7 different types. Slug lines, parentheticals, sounds intense.
It's like learning a new language, but once you get the hang of it...
It clicks.
Exactly. It all makes sense. Let's start with the foundation, shall we? Scene headings and action, those are the backbone of your script.
Okay, so scene headings, those are basically like chapter titles, right?
They're like signposts telling us where and when a scene takes place. We call them slug lines in the biz. Always all cap ES, left aligned.
Got it. So INT, coffee shop day, for
A
example.
perfect example. Tells us we're inside a coffee shop, it's daytime, simple but effective. Now, action lines, those are like the narration you'd find in a novel.
Aiming the picture.
Exactly. But in present tense, active voice, they describe what's happening on screen, but without directing the camera or the actors.
A barista steams milk, her face illuminated by the espresso machine's glow, for example.
Exactly. Clear, visual, not overly specific, perfect.
So we've got the setting, the action.
Yeah.
Now we need some characters to liven things up.
Absolutely, and that's where character and dialogue come in. This is where our characters get to speak.
So character is simply the character's name, right?
Yeah, all CCAP PS, centered on the page. And right below that, you've got the dialogue.
Indented, formatted to show it's the character speaking.
Precisely. Keeps everything clear, easy to follow. But sometimes you want to add a little more flavor to how a character says something.
Spice it up a bit.
Exactly, and that's where parentheticals come in handy. Remember those?
Oh yeah, those were mentioned.
They provide a little direction on a character's delivery, subtle cues. They go right below the character name, in parentheses, of course. So you might have whispering or with a sly smile.
Ah, I see. So it's like giving the reader a glimpse into the character's emotions, their delivery.
Exactly, adds another layer to the dialogue without being too intrusive.
Got it. So what about those other terms, shots and transitions? Those sound pretty self-explanatory, but I'm curious.
Good catch. Those are used less often, especially in spec scripts, which is what you'll likely be writing starting out.
Spec scripts, those are like the draft you send out to try and get your foot in the door.
Exactly, your calling card. So shots, those are your specific camera angles, close OP on phone screen, something like that. They're all CAP-ES left aligned.
Okay, so if you really want to emphasize a certain visual, you can throw a shot in there.
You can, but like I said, use them sparingly. Same goes for transitions.
Transitions, those are like fade out or cut to black, right?
You got it. Those tell us how we move from one scene to the next. All CAP-ES, right? Aligned.
I feel like I'm starting to understand this whole screenplay formatting language now. It's pretty cool, actually.
It is once you get the hang of it. It's all about creating a fluid reading experience.
It's not just about typing up a story.
No, it's about presenting it in a way that pulls the reader in, makes them feel like they're watching the movie in their mind.
So we've covered these 7-line types. They all have their purpose. But how do we actually make Google Docs do all of this? Because honestly, it sounds like a recipe for a tab and space nightmare. It does sound a bit like, well, a lot of manual work to get it right.
It can be, yeah. Essentially, you've got two options with Google Docs. The first one, let's call it the manual method, involves a lot of tab and spacebar action, getting everything aligned just so.
Not very high tech, is it?
It's got its downsides for sure. The alternative is using Google Docs' styles feature. You're essentially creating presets for each of those screenplay line types we talked about.
Ah, so you're basically teaching Google Docs to speak fluent screenplay, setting those formatting rules as like a template.
That's a great way to put it, yeah. It takes a bit of setup time, but can save you headaches in the long run, especially if you're planning on writing multiple scripts.
Makes sense. Work smarter, not harder, as they say.
Yeah.
But even with the styles workaround, it still feels like we're kind of, I don't know, forcing Google Docs to be something it's not.
I get what you mean.
Like trying to bake a cake with a fork instead of a mixer.
Technically doable, but not ideal.
Perfect analogy. And it gets to the core of the issue. Google Docs, fantastic writing tool, no doubt, but dedicated screenwriting software. That's where it shines. Programs like Final Draft, Fade In, Keltext, they're built for this. They automate those formatting rules so you can focus on what truly matters, the story.
That's good to know. So for our listeners out there who are eager to jump into the world of screenwriting, what's the final verdict on Google Docs? Green light, or are we waving that red flag?
It's a bit nuanced, honestly. Google Docs can get the job done, especially for those early drafts if you're just dipping your toes in. But it's important to be aware of the downsides.
What kind of pitfalls are we talking about?
Time, for one. Manually formatting, even with styles, it takes away from writing time. And let's be honest, inconsistencies, errors, they happen, and they can be a distraction for industry pros. Dedicated software, it eliminates those worries, lets you present your work professionally in that industry standard format. That makes a lot of sense. What about for those just starting out, maybe not ready to invest in software yet? Any budget-friendly options out there?
Tons. A quick online search for screenwriting software free. You'll find some great ones, even free trials, so you can test the waters before committing.
Excellent tip. Okay, so to sum it all up for our listeners, all this Google Docs wisdom, what's the big takeaway?
The key takeaway is this. Technically, yes, you can format a screenplay in Google Docs. Is it the most efficient, effective way? Probably not. Dedicated software just streamlines the process, makes sure you're presenting your story in a way that aligns with industry standards, lets you focus on what matters, writing a compelling screenplay.
Absolutely. And it's incredible how something as seemingly simple as formatting can make such a difference in this industry.
It's true.
It's like a hidden language, a signal to those in the know that you understand the craft.
Exactly.
Well, that is quite the thought to ponder. Big thanks to our expert for demystifying the world of screenplay formatting, sharing all those insights.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to our listeners, happy writing. May your stories find their way to the screen, perfectly formatted and ready to captivate audiences.